Hello! Magandang hapon! Kumusta po kayong lahat? Welcome to the June 2021 edition of the UP-SLIS webinar series. We welcome our viewers, students, and teachers of library and information science, information professionals, and all our friends and fans in the Philippines and across the globe. I am Ina Santos, a faculty member from UP-SLIS, your host and moderator for this webinar. Before we proceed, please take note that our webinar is in high definition or HD. For an optimal viewing experience, please check and adjust the settings of this live stream to HD. You may also take the opportunity to check the audio and adjust the volume to a comfortable listening level. This webinar can be seen live on our YouTube channel and on our Facebook page, UP-SLIS. We also launched our new channel on Twitch TV, so you can watch this webinar at twitch.tv/UPSLIS. This webinar is the last installment of the hashtag Webinar Wednesday, a series of monthly webinar offerings of the UP School of Library and Information Studies. As we count down to our 60th anniversary on July 2021. That's next month. We're very excited for the upcoming activities we'll be rolling out soon. I hope that you are too. And before we proceed to our talk, allow me to explain the mechanics of this webinar. If you have any questions during the lecture, you may post your question by going to www.menti.com and typing in the code 80781673. All questions will be tackled in a question and answer portion after the speakers have presented. Please take note that we will not be entertaining questions posted in the chat. Again, you may post your question by going to menti.com and typing in the code 80781673. The website and code will be shown on screen throughout the talk. Alternatively, you could use the QR code, also shown on screen, to go to the questions page. At menti.com, you may view the questions posted by our other viewers. If a question you wish to ask has already been posted, please upvote the question by clicking its thumbs up icon so we can prioritize and address it first. We will be issuing certificates of participation to those who will be joining us in this live event. We ask that you finish the webinar and watch out for the announcement containing the link to where you can register for your certificate. As part of the requirements for the certificate, you need to answer a question correctly. We advise that you listen intently to the speakers during the talk. If you answer incorrectly, you can rewatch the video and try again. For registered professionals, this webinar may be applied for continuing professional development or CPD, a self-directed learning activity. Again, please stay with us until the end of this webinar for instructions on how to get your certificate. If in case you miss portions of this webinar, you may view this as a Facebook video or check our YouTube and Twitch channels. Today, we will have yet another very special, informative, interesting webinar. For today's feature, we have not one, but two highly respected LIS educators who will share with us their knowledge and insights pertaining to research methodologies. I know that you are all excited to meet our speakers, so allow me to introduce them to you. Our first speaker this afternoon is Dr. Iyra S. Buenrostro-Cabbab. Dr. Buenrostro-Cabbab finished her PhD in Information Studies in March 2019 from Wee Kim Wee School of Communication and Information at the Nanyang Technological University, where she was a recipient of a 4-year NTU Research Scholarship. She obtained both her Bachelor of Library and Information Science cum laude and her Master of Library and Information Science, specializing in archival studies degrees from the University of the Philippines, Diliman in 2005 and 2010, respectively. Ma'am Iyra is a licensed librarian and she placed 4th in the 2005 licensure examination for librarians in the Philippines. She joined the academe in 2006, and at present, she is an associate professor at the UP School of Library and Information Studies, where she teaches LIS and archival studies courses, both in the undergraduate and graduate levels. She has been and is currently involved in projects related to education and training of librarians, archivists, and records managers, establishment and management of record centers and archives, and preservation of historical records. Her research interests include the development of archival theory and practice, the politics of libraries and archives and their role in the formation of collective memory, the use, contextualization, and preservation of archives, such as photographic records and Filipiniana historical sources, and qualitative research methods in LIS. She is currently the editor-in-chief of the Philippine Journal of Librarianship and Information Studies, formerly the Journal of Philippine Librarianship, the first and longest-running academic journal in LIS in the Philippines. Hi, Ma'am Iyra.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Iyra. And thanks for this opportunity to be on the last webinar for this series.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Our second speaker is Professor Dan Anthony D. Dorado. Professor Dorado is a full-time faculty member at the UP School of Library and Information Studies, where he teaches information technology, management and marketing, research methodology, and statistical analysis. He is also currently the director of the Diliman Learning Resource Center. Prior to that, he was an information specialist at the College of Engineering Library, where he was in charge of the System and Network Administration and the Learning Commons. He finished his master's degree at the Technology Management Center in UP Diliman. Currently, his research specialization covers applied informatics and digital scholarship. Hi, Sir Dan.
Afternoon. I hope everyone is safe and doing well.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, to talk about changing gears, qualitative or quantitative research, let us all welcome Dr. Iyra S. Buenrostro-Cabbab and Professor Dan Anthony Dorado.
Ay, ang hirap talaga ng research. Sa sobrang hirap, minsan parang gusto mo na lang lumipad.
Napalipad ka talaga doon, ano? Especially if that is your research problem and research question, no? Talagang hirap.
Karamihan nga ma'am doon sa mga estudyante ko, research problem pa lang, pinoproblema na nila.
Yes, of course. I think that's it's really one of the most difficult parts of doing research, thinking about your research problem. And I think sunod na problema nun is what kind of methodology and methods to be used to address their research problem and research questions.
Which is exactly ma'am yung pag-uusapan natin ngayong hapon.
Yes, so that's our topic for this webinar. And this webinar is not really a strict webinar, and we're looking forward to receiving your questions and also your comments after our lecture and conversation. Okay? So I think in this afternoon, for this afternoon, what we're going to talk about is not really the differentiation between quantitative and qualitative. We will differentiate them, of course, but we're not really pitting them against each other. Yes, because it's up to our viewers, to our researchers or potential researchers, what kind of methods or methodologies that you would like to adopt for your own respective research. So what we're going to present this afternoon, and we're going to talk about these things, are just the options, the options and the nature of quantitative and qualitative research, from which you can choose from. So currently, I'm guiding students to do their research, especially our students in the graduate level, those taking up MLIS in UPSLIS. So I'm guiding them to formulate their problems and also to try to figure out the kinds of methodologies and methods that they can use for their respective research problems and questions. So one thing that I would like to tell them and also to tell our audience this afternoon is that there is no best kind of methodology and method in this world. I mean, that will always depend on the kind of research problems and also the kind of paradigm and thinking and mindset that you have as a person and as a researcher. So this afternoon, we're not aiming to really differentiate quantitative from qualitative. Well, of course, we will be providing some descriptions that make them different from each other. But what we're trying to do here, and what we're trying to provide our viewers for this afternoon, is are actually different options and different. The different options and the different descriptions of quantitative and qualitative, and which of them do you think is a better fit for your research interest and of course your research problem. Okay? So of course, why do we have to do research? Why do we have to do this? Now, aside from the fact that maybe we will be doing this for what? As a course requirement. You need to finish your master's degree, you need to finish your bachelor's degree or your doctorate degree. But why do we do research and why do we have to do it?
So I think for most of our viewers na estudyante, it's their terminal requirement
Yes.
para makagraduate dun sa course nila. Sabi nga natin, this is your chance to showcase that you can make something out of your education after studying for 4 years, for 5 years, even more. Meron kang kayang gawin dun sa mga natutunan mo. And usually that is a research that can contribute sa profession or sa domain of knowledge na pinabibilangan mo. For some, this is a way para ma-promote sila, para makita na there is progression sa kanilang career. And for some, it's just out of curiosity. Sabi nga natin, research is a formalized way to satisfy our curiosity. And overall, ang goal lang naman talaga ng research is makita kung saan may gap, saan pa merong mga what if na hindi natin na-explore, and eventually masagot yung mga tanong na yun. So hopefully mag-enjoy yung mga viewers natin ngayong hapon, and hopefully maliwanagan namin kayo, ma-assist namin kayo sa paano nyo maitatawid or paano nyo maka-move forward sa research.
Yeah. And Dan already mentioned about the gaps that we're trying to address here when you're doing your research. And I think one of the biggest gaps that we need to address or to fill in when we're doing research is the theory part, or the concepts that really support our profession, or how we conduct our services in the libraries, for instance, and also the things that could explain why we are doing the things that we do in our profession, particularly in the LIS profession. Again, we are not pitting qualitative and quantitative methods now against each other, because what we're trying to provide here in this webinar are the tips and the options that you can use to better understand your topic of interest and also the community that you're trying to serve and help when you are doing your research, or if you intend to do a research about them. And another thing is, again, I mentioned earlier, na may mga gaps, may mga theoretical gaps, may empirical gaps, and we will try to fill this in using research, and of course, with the help of the methods, and different data collection strategies, and of course, analyses that we can do to answer these problems.
to reiterate, ma'am, yung sinabi nyo kanina, I usually tell my student that research and research methodology classes are like a Swiss knife. You have that, pwede mo namang hindi gamitin lahat ng tools na nandun at any given time, but it's good to have them at your pocket at your when the time comes na kailangan mo siyang gamitin, kasi nga you cannot really tell aling method ang kakailanganin mo when you are exposed to a research or a research problem. Pwedeng akala mo sa simula ng research, akala mo quanti ka, pero habang ine-explore mo yung research mo, ay quali pala ako, or vice versa. Or minsan, magandang explore ko both quanti and quali kasi it's a way to validate my data.
So, and also, yes, and another thing is that when you do your research, again, I think I said this earlier, that it will really depend on your ontology, your epistemology, your mindset, how you view the world. If you're the type of person who likes numbers, perhaps, quantitative research may be a good fit for you. If you're not the type of person if you're the type of person naman on the other hand who likes to experience, a lot of things and communicate with people, probably the qualitative methods or the qualitative research could be something that is parang mas makaka-provide mas magandang experience para sa iyo. But hindi naman nakakahon ng quanti and quali doon because, of course, again, as Dan mentioned, these are the tools that you can make use of, and these tools should not be the ones controlling you as a researcher and as a person. Okay?
Ako nga, ang hope ko, Ma'am Iyra S, after nila mapanood itong lecture natin, itong episode natin ngayong araw, ma-inspire sila to collaborate,
Yes.
na if they can reach out, kung quali sila, they can reach out to a quanti person to
Yes.
validate or to expand the research that they are doing. And I'm very sure they will be surprised kung ano yung possibilities na pwedeng ma-reach ng research nila.
Just like what we're doing, Dan, diba? I mean, we're always teaming up for, especially in events or venues like this. Now, whenever we talk about or discuss research, laging may Dan, laging may Iyra, no? So, lagi natin pinagkasama because quantitative and qualitative are complementary. Kung ano yung hindi kayang punan ni quali can be filled in by quanti, and then the quant and vice versa din. So I think they really complement each other. So rather than looking at them na parang magkahiwalay sila, it's better to look at the strengths and the limitations of these methods and methodologies rather than just focusing on one and then neglecting the other one. That's why we have mixed methods then. Diba?
So to start off our discussion, maganda munang simulan natin at least ma-define ang ilang concepts. So yung research approaches, research methods, research designs, and yung research problem. Minsan kasi sa mga konsepto na to nalilito agad yung mga researcher natin. Minsan pag sinabing research design, ang nilalagay agad dito, quantitative or qualitative. So iba-iba sila, and this is something that you have to define exactly para kapag binasa din ng mga readers ng research nyo, yung output nyo, alam din nila kung saan kayo nanggagaling, kung ano yung pinanggagalingan nyo. Okay? Based on research, in terms of quantitative methods and qualitative methods, ito yung mga most used methods. So for quantitative methods, ayan, mga surveys and questionnaires. So maraming research sa LIS ang gumagamit ng ganitong methods, lalo na yung mga Likert scale because it's one of the easiest way to operationalize a concept. Content analysis, kapag nag-bibliographic study tayo, content analysis, author analysis, ayan. So observing and recording events and using existing data. So minsan kasi nag-exist na yung data, naturally sa isang, for example, pwede natin makuha dito sa government. So a lot of those researches utilizes quantitative methods. For quali naman, Ma'am Iyra?
Okay, so for the qualitative methods in LAS research, usually what we're using are in-depth interviews, focus group discussions, observations, and cognitive mapping and reflective diaries. So most of the time when you look at different literature, especially in the field of information science and information studies, medyo mas konti ang qualitative methods. No? But I think based on the analysis of different research done in different LAS journals all over the world, there is an increasing number of qualitative research being done in the past couple of years. And it's a nice progression, I guess, in our field because, as I said earlier, there are things that may not be fully addressed, by surveys, by the use of questionnaires. So the in-depth interviews or even focus group discussions can answer some of those things that cannot be simply described through numerical analysis or statistical analysis. So we'll find out more of these methods and the different ways to approach our research problems quantitatively and qualitatively later.
Okay, so let's proceed to the main topic of our webinar today. And again, we would like to emphasize, we cannot emphasize this enough, that we are not pitting quantitative and qualitative towards one another. We are just trying to expose you kung ano yung mga pwede nyong gamitin for your research so that if ever you will be needing these methods, familiar kayo, aware kayo. Kung hindi pa kayo ganun ka-familiar, then at least meron kayong way para mabalikan or ma-explore yung mga to. So what is the difference? So first of all, what is quantitative research? Quantitative research is a research in which researchers studies a problem that calls for an explanation about a variable. So this is rooted towards our inherent need to know what will happen or to control what is happening around us. So quantitative research is all about generalizing the world around us. So gusto ko ma-predict na bukas alam ko kung uulan o hindi. Gusto ko ma-predict kung kailan maraming tao sa library. Gusto ko ma-predict kung kailan nila hahanapin itong piece of information na to or itong piece of information na to. So quantitative research is about, again, trying to explain a variable, and by explaining it, mas naiintindihan mo siya, mas mape-predict mo yung behavior niya, yung phenomenon na yon in the future, and you may want to control that variable. So usually gusto mong pag-aralan what are the factors that affects this phenomenon, this variable. So dun papasok yung decide what to study and ask specific questions para ma-narrow down mo siya. So for example, IQ. So there are a lot of factors that affects IQ. So pwede yung genes mo, yung environment mo, yung gatas na iniinom mo nung baby ka pa. So these factors are going to be the subject of your research. So na-narrow down mo na siya, and then gusto mong malaman to what extent nakaka-apekto itong mga factors na to dun sa variable of interest mo. So paano mo siya gagawin? You will collect data, for example, ang variable of interest mo sa gatas. So you will collect data kapag milk A ba yung ininom mo versus milk B versus milk C. So what will happen kapag after 5 years, after 10 years, kumusta yung maging IQ ng bata? You are going to analyze these numbers quantitatively. So you will be using statistics, and you will conduct inquiry in an unbiased and objective manner. So pag sinabing unbiased, in objective manner yung axiology mo as a person, yung cultural background mo, yung values mo, yung dapat hindi nagmamatter sa research mo. So whether you are male or female, you are Filipino or from the US, whether you believe in God or not, dapat hindi nagmamatter yon sa research mo. So yun yung ibig sabihin ng unbiased, objective manner. So let's proceed to qualitative research. Iyra, can you tell us how can we identify a qualitative research?
So, how can we identify a qualitative research? So, at first glance, of course, obviously, you'll see a qualitative research as a research that doesn't have numbers. Walang numbers, unlike quantitative research that you mentioned earlier, okay, statistics, numerical analysis. That's how you present your data when you do the quantitative research. For quali, there might be some numbers, but it's just simple, Kunyari, ilang number or ilan yung nag-participate in the interviews or ilan yung nag-participate sa focus group discussion, ilan yung nagbigay sa'yo ng let's say, ng diaries nila or sa mga ganun lang kasimple. And we do not quantify the data that we gather in qualitative research. We do not, of course, we do not also aim generalization. If you remember Dan's definition of quantitative research, kanina sabi niya, quantitative research aims to what? To generalize results, to find the normal occurrence, ano yung normal event na nangyayari. But for qualitative, hindi, And we subscribe to the idea of subjectivity. Your own subjectivities as a researcher or as a person or even as a participant in the research shapes the kind of narrative or the kind of information that you will be providing for your research or you will be presenting in your research. So yes, we study the social world as well, just like quantitative research. We study how people move, people's preferences or people's perceptions about events and phenomena. We also do that in qualitative research, but we analyze their culture and their behavior based on their own point of view. Ibig sabihin nun, we analyze their experiences, their perceptions based on their point of view, and we subscribe again to the idea of subjectivity. We accept that their own culture, their own beliefs, their own views may have an effect on the kind of information or responses that they will be giving to you as a researcher. And another thing is that pinakamahalagang pinakamahalagang bagay when you do your qualitative research or when you read the qualitative research is that the reason why people do this kind of research is that they want to understand, describe, or explain social phenomenon again from the inside. So how do they do it? Through analysis of experiences of individuals and groups, through analysis again of perhaps interactions and communications in the making, and also through analysis then ng documents or even similar traces of experiences and interactions. So yun yung meron talagang communication with people, and then you really value whatever they say. Yung kasi pag sa stat kasi or sa quantitative research, di ba, you try to just put a numerical value on their single response and then you try to generalize the results based on that. But for qualitative research, individual responses or even individual experience really matters for your research and also for the analysis of your study. And the end goal of qualitative research is to illuminate how people make meanings, how people construct meanings. And these meanings may be different from your own meaning, from other people's meanings, from other people's experiences. And yun yung tinatry natin na i-provide in qualitative research because we want to provide not just description, but we want to provide rich descriptions. That's what qualitative research is about. So, baka nga iniisip nyo, parang ang gulo, parang hirap gawin, But later on, you will see how we can actually do it. and how we can apply the different methods and all when you conduct a qualitative research.
So, ang ganda nung flow nung topic natin kasi for quantitative research, parang ang gusto namin ay ikahon ang bagay-bagay para makontrol, para ma-predict namin ang mundo versus quali kung saan hindi pwede mo siyang ikahon kasi maraming kahon. At bawat kahon ay hindi naman nangangahulugan na mas tama ang kahon na to kaysa sa kahon na to. It's just that marami lang talagang kahon.
And yung mga kahon na yun, maaari na the next day, lumabas na from the kahon, yung nandun sa kahon yesterday. Kasi we accept or we acknowledge in qualitative research that things are evolving, things are changing, na hindi siya static, no? Hindi siya static. That is why in quantitative research, you can predict, diba? You can make inferences, diba? Inferential statistics. But for qualitative research, that is not our goal. We do not aim to predict what will happen in the next 10, 20 years by just observing this phenomenon. What we're trying to provide here in qualitative research is, again, a rich description what is currently happening now. Or pwede rin naman a rich description of the past through historical analysis or through document analysis. And that's these are two types of commonly used, again, qualitative research methods.
Yan. So I hope at this point, magkakaroon na kayo ng idea on the difference between the two approaches, and hopefully magkaroon na kayo ng idea ngayon kung kailan nyo pwedeng gamitin yung isang approach over the other.
So we keep talking about quanti, quali, how they can address different research problems, but let's focus now on the research problems. Okay, so in quantitative research and qualitative research, how do you identify them or how do you distinguish them from each other? So Dan, probably you can explain it to us.
So as mentioned a while ago, when we talk about quantitative research, the goal of the research is to explain or predict relationships among your chosen variable. Kasi nga, you want to control them or you want to replicate a phenomenon. So gusto ko uling mangyari uli in the future. So anong gagawin ko? Anong resources ang kakailanganin ko para magawa ko uli yun in the future? Other research problems that would require a quantitative approach are problems that call for new knowledge to explain the effect of a particular treatment or a particular ano ba yung ibang term sa treatment on how you influence a variable. So kaya ang quantitative approach very predominant to sa hard sciences, sa economics, because these are fields, these are domains kung saan as much as possible gusto mong makontrol yung output mo at the end of the research. So for example, sa economics, gusto mong makontrol ang inflation, gusto mong makontrol ang poverty. So what factors of the economy should you adjust, should you change para ma-achieve mo yung result na gusto mong makuha. So that is for quantitative research. How about for qualitative research?
Yeah. For qualitative research, the key assumption in doing qualitative research is that the meaning of events, occurrences, and interactions can be understood through the actual participants in specific situations. So it is rather difficult to know or predict, just like what quantitative research is doing, in advance what such phenomena means to those being studied. So we inductively understand those being studied from their perspective again. I think I also mentioned this earlier, and from their point of view. So our approach in qualitative research lies within the interpretivist paradigm, which focuses on the constantly evolving and complex social constructs that cannot be fully interpreted using precise measurements. So again, our goal here is not to generalize results, but to provide rich descriptions. And we subscribe to the idea that people change, social constructs change, obviously, and also the understanding of people, of their environment, and different phenomena also changes. So, hindi natin pwedeng ikahon lang ulit. Hindi tayo nagpe-predict pagdating dito sa qualitative research. And also, you will also notice when you read qualitative research papers, you'll see that it's more about contextualization. It's all about interpretation, understanding participant perspectives. The approaches involve, of course, theory generation. It's very naturalistic, very natural. We try to maintain the natural environment of our participants because we are not controlling any variables. Unlike quantitative research, for example, you'd conduct pure experiment. You need to, let's say, you need to you need to control several variables that may have an effect on this variable. But for qualitative research, no. Hayaan mo na lang sila. If they want to be interviewed in this environment, go ahead. If they want to be observed in this environment, then during this time, during this scenario, go ahead. You have to respect your participants because, again, you will have to maintain the natural environment or your naturalistic approach na tinatawag natin in qualitative research. And of course, your role as a researcher is all about your involvement and partiality. Actually, in quantitative research, you should be impartial, diba? You should be objective. But in qualitative research, we acknowledge that the researcher himself or herself also has their own partiality and, again, subjectivities. And we acknowledge that in qualitative research.
So, gusto ko lang, ma'am, uli i-juxtapose yung sabi nyo kanina. For quali, it's theory generation. Yes. Versus for quanti, usually ang approach ay theory verification or gustong i-adjust ng konti yung theory. Pero kasi nga, gusto mong may model ka, gusto mong meron kang model ng mundo kung saan mag-fit lahat. So, at the end of the day, doon pa rin yung patak ng quantitative. Versus sabi nyo nga, for quali, you want to explore the different ways people can see different cultures, different individuals, and using those different lenses, ang ganda lang ng idea na may iba't ibang realidad and minsan hindi lang natin siya nakikita. Kaya kailangan natin gawin yung quality research.
Because quantitative research is all about theory verification and theory testing, whether this theory explains this certain phenomenon.
Gustong i-augment or gustong palakasin yung
theory. O i-extend yung theory na yon. Whereas in qualitative research, it is not hypothesis-driven. So hindi again, wala kasing prediction na hindi agad natin sinasabi na, siguro pag ganito yung ginawa ng taong to, ito yung mag-e-explain sa kanya. No, it doesn't work that way. We generate our theories inductively. So we have a broad research question. Usually it starts with how, why, yung mga ganun, yung ganun mga question. And then from there, we will just explore further what will happen if we ask these questions, like what is going on here? So actually that is the grounded theory, which we will not be discussing in this webinar because we will need one semester to really discuss that. But research questions in qualitative research are usually derived from rigorous literature review. So you need to read a lot and examination of possible theoretical frameworks and lenses, or arise again from a more grounded theory approach. And you ask yourself, what is going on here? Laging isipin yun. Kapag gagawa kayo ng research in qualitative lens or frame, Sipin niyo, what is going on here? And you always ask questions na why? Why? Why is this happening? Diba? So lagi yung mga tanong ninyo. And these questions are usually open-ended. And this can be refined, this can be restated, can be discarded. Sinabi nga ni Dan kanina, naisip mo ngayon na parang, di yata ito nag-fit, wag na natin gawin. Or, it can be added later. No? Itong mga questions. Ganun ka-flexible ang qualitative research. Kaya hindi siya ganun ka-favorite ng mga nasa hard sciences. Kasi, of course, for hard sciences, everything has to be systematic. But, this doesn't make qualitative research less scientific. Qualitative research is also systematic and very rigorous. So later on, you will see how we can test or we can check the reliability and validity of your own method and also the analysis of your qualitative data.
So, dahil na-mention yun na rin po yung role ng literature review sa quali, maybe it's a good time to discuss na the role of literature and the role of literature review sa quali and sa quali. So at this point, let's talk about naman the literature review and how do we evaluate a lit review if pang quanti siya or pang quali siya. So for quantitative research, to evaluate the literature review in quantitative research, you have to look for 4 parts. And usually in quantitative research, meron talaga tong sinusunod na structure. So yung introduction, yung method, yung results, at yung conclusion. So sa introduction, dito nyo makikita yung mga models na gustong i-reinforce or i-challenge ng research na to. And usually, dito nyo rin makikita yung hypothesis na gustong i-test ng researcher. Sa methods part, andito yung kanyang way of how to collect data randomly, unbiased, para ma-assure na walang bias yung makukuha niyang results. And usually, dito rin niya din discuss anong statistical tool, anong statistical computations yung gagamitin. Sa results part, usually dito niya i-represent yung kanyang results as objectively as possible. And the only way that a quantitative researcher can do that is by presenting the numbers. So again, usually numbers, wala naman yung religion, wala naman yung culture, wala yung pinaniniwalaan. So as much as possible, it's number driven para lang wala ka talagang ma-exploit na values. And pagdating sa conclusion, dito uli i-explore kung na-prove ba or na-disprove yung hypothesis na na-articulate sa simula ng research. Dito rin i-explore kung nag-fit ba yung results ng research sa mga previously known models or nag-fit ba yung results sa kung ano yung considered normal. So either na-reinforced yung widely accepted models or nagkaroon ng konting falsification. So pag na-falsify yung current models, baka kailangan i-adjust, baka kailangan i-revisit, or baka kailangan ng mas updated model. So usually ganon ang itsura ng literature review pagdating sa quantitative research. Paano naman po for quality research?
Okay. For qualitative research, it's actually tricky, It's tricky to really evaluate and fully understand the literature review, and also when you do literature review in qualitative research. Kasi wala kami talagang strict na structure compared to quantitative research na meron talagang introduction, method, talagang may structure kayo, no? In quali kasi, there are different types of qualitative research that sometimes narrative yung type niya, narrative yung style. Yung iba naman, parang quantitative din, na mayroong introduction, may method, may analysis. Yung iba naman, iba rin talaga yung parang yung medyo literary yung approach, no? So, in qualitative research, presentation is very important. So, it has to be direct, it has to be clear, and persuasive. So when you read different literature employing qualitative research design and methods, kailangan direct, clear, persuasive. Ibig sabihin nun, kitang-kita mo agad sa start pa lang, ano yung research question ng paper. No? Ano yung tinatry na i-address nung author, no? O nung researcher. And at the same time, persuasive din. Bakit persuasive? Kasi kailangan may writing style ka talaga na you can really capture the attention of your viewers or your audience or your readers. Because usually, qualitative research, mahahaba yan eh. Yan yung mga mahahabang mga research talaga. Kasi may mga narrative din, may mga mahahaba yung analysis niya. So kung hindi ka direct, hindi ka clear, at hindi ka persuasive enough, usually, your readers will be lost, no? And with those millions of words na sinulat ninyo, mawawala talaga yung reader mo. So, yun din, when you are evaluating and reading literature for your own research, when you do qualitative research, kailangan tingnan nyo, ano ba yung problem niya? Ano ba yung tinatry niya na i-address dito? And at the same time, ito yung mga kailangan yung tingnan din. Yung reliability, yung data analysis, and yung validity, you know? Okay, so isipin niyo, is this paper really, or is this research really reliable? Kasi baka gino-joke lang ako nito, no? Or binobola lang ako kasi sobrang persuasive niya. Kaya nga tricky talaga na magbasa ng qualitative research. Minsan kasi sobrang haba ng kwento, aliw na aliw ka, no? Nakakalimutan natin itong mga criteria na to, yung reliability, yung analysis, and then the validity. So let's start with reliability. So for you to check the reliability, no, you have to look at the details of the method and its logic and adequacy. So usually, sa methods part, the researcher or the author has to indicate the actual process, no, na ginawa niya as a researcher. Gaano siya ka-reflexive, because we have this concept of reflexivity in qualitative research, and pati na rin yung mga ethics part na may consent ba ng mga participants niya na mag-participate sa research niya. So yung mga ganong klase, mga bagay, these things have to be mentioned in the methods part, or hindi man sa methods part, o kung saan mang part na kung saan there is a discussion of the method or yung details of the processes that the author went through when they're conducting the research. So, in reliability also, there must be an evidence of the researcher's qualifications as observers and as researchers. So, chine-check din yan in, may judgment ng konti, So, for example, you are doing an ethnographic research in this type of community, pero hindi ka native ng community na yon. So, you have to explain fully in one portion of your paper na ganun yung situation mo. You have to indicate there how you situate yourself as a researcher in this study. So that your readers, so pag nabasa ng readers mo na, okay, in-explain naman pala niya why this person conducted this research, pero hindi naman siya part ng community na yon. So the reliability and also the validity of the findings or the research itself in qualitative research ay hindi siya nagre-rely sa dami ng sample. Usually kasi 'di ba, in quanti, mas madami, mas masaya, mas reliable, mas valid. In qualitative research, hindi. Kasi yan, kausapin mo, that's fine. As long as na-check niyo na yung reliability, analysis, and validity, because transparent, transparent yung author or yung researcher with the process that the author underwent, So, dun yung nakikita yung difference ng reliability and validity. We're not really into measuring, how valid the data is, sa qualitative research, kundi ang tinitingnan natin dito, how rigorous, how rigorous that data collection is. Especially pagdating sa validity and data analysis, there should be a full discussion of the analysis methods, pati yung field note-taking procedures, the data arrangement and storage, the coding, no? The categories that you came up with, and the different concepts or terms that you operationalized for your research. And for the validity, this refers to the extent to which something actually measures or what it's intended to measure, di ba? Kunyari, I interviewed this, na-interview din ako ng iba, and then I triangulate the data that I collected through document by using another method, which is document analysis. Okay? So again, hindi siya sa dami ng in-interview, hindi siya sa dami ng documents na in-analyze ninyo, kundi nandun sa rigor ng mismong process that you used for you to come up with those data and also for you to analyze those data. Okay? So yun yung difference ng quanti and quali when you're looking at literature. Kaya ko sinasabi to kasi wala talagang ganun ka-strict na structure when you read literature na lalo na sa part ng qualitative research.
So I hope this is something that can help our viewers when doing their literature review. Kasi isa to sa mga exercises na medyo mahirap talaga kasi it's very rigorous. Pag hindi mo alam kung ano yung kailangan mong hanapin, malulos ka talaga. So at least at the very least, magkaroon sila ng idea how to identify a quanti versus a quali research pagdating sa lit review nila.
You really have to look at the discussion of the methods in the literature para lang makita niyo na, okay, ito yung quali, ito yung quanti. Tapos dalawa sila, mixed methods to.
So speaking of methods, let's proceed to the research design.
Ayan, no? So then, how about the research design?
Okay, so when we talk about research design, it's basically the blueprint of how are you going to collect your data. So kung sa bahay, ito yung blueprint mo kung paano mo step by step bubuin yung bahay mo. For quantitative research, it's very linear. Okay, it's a step by step process, and usually may mga criteria na kailangan ma-satisfy bago mo magawa yung data collection, or may mga criteria ka kailangan ma-satisfy para magamit mo yung isang particular statistical tool. Okay? If hindi mo ma-satisfy yung mga criteria na to, then you are going to deal with a different type of way to analyze your data later on. Pero as much as possible, when designing your research, specifically your research design, yun yung gusto mong ma-hit, yun yung gusto mong ma-achieve. Masatisfy mo yung mga criteria na yun para kapag nag-analysis ka, mas madali yung buhay para sa'yo. Hindi ko na i-discuss yung mga details na yun, but know that those criteria exist. Okay? So as mentioned, it's a very linear process. And again, the end goal is to generalize. Usually to look for the truth, or how to look for outliers minsan. So usually well-defined kung ano yung considered normal, and ang nagiging subject ng research ay yung mga outliers, yung mga hindi nagko-conform sa ano yung accepted normal. So usually yun yung nagiging magandang pag-aralan, kasi bakit hindi sila nagko-conform, bakit hindi nila ma-achieve yung expected natin sa kanila. So usually ang mga methods that would involve quantitative design are yung through experiments. So ngayon very familiar tayo sa mga clinical studies because of what is happening. So yun yung mga mini-mention na stage 1, stage 2 hanggang stage 4 clinical trials, because as much as possible, kailangan maintindihan nila talaga kung ano ang mga factors na makaka-apekto sa COVID-19 virus, kapag binago ba ang dosage, ano maging epekto nito, kung magkaibang brand ang tinake mo, ano maging epekto nun. So it's very important para sa mga gumagawa ng mga clinical studies na to. And those clinical studies are through experiments. If walang masyadong numerical data, yung dataset na makukuha mo sa research mo, usually categorical yung nakukuha mong data, dyan papasok yung tinatawag na factorial design. So even if hindi numerical yung data mo, there are still ways para conclude mo if one categorical variable affects another categorical variable. So yun yung factorial design. Pre-test, post-test, measurement before and after mo i-implement yung treatment, time series. So what will happen over a long period of time. Usually pag time series ang method, minimum 10 years. Yan. Correlational, so how much of X affects Y or vice versa, or meron bang Z na nakaka-apekto pa sa kanila. And then meta-analysis, usually ito yung mga bibliographic study na ginagawa natin, mga subject analysis, content analysis. So gusto natin makita yung mga network clustering pagdating sa research na to or sa topic na to, ano yung mga literature na nagkukumpulan kasi sila palagi nasa site, sila palagi yung mention. So dyan papasok yung meta-analysis. Let's talk about quality research. Ano naman po ang research design ng quality research?
Well, for the research design of qualitative research, sabi ni Dan kanina, para kami blueprint, no, pag sa quanti. Ganon din naman sa quali, no? So planning and designing your qualitative research is like creating a roadmap. A roadmap naman that will set your goals, your target participants or your informants, and potential themes that will give you some cues for your probable codes that you may use when you start analyzing your data. So your research design will include not just the actual way to collect your data, but also how you can potentially analyze your data. Because data analysis in qualitative research doesn't just happen after the collection of data. In quantitative research, usually after mo makumpleto lahat, diba? So, saka ka mag-analyze. But for qualitative research, you can start analyzing your data kahit nasa gitna ka o habang ginagawa mo yung data collection mo. Because again, the codes or the themes or categories na gagamitin mo for you to make sense of your qualitative data, these things can happen during your data collection. So I think my tip for that is when something appears, no, or pops dun sa isip mo habang nagko-collect ka ng data, nag-interview ka, nag-field work ka, you always bring a notebook with you o pwede ring phone, no? So write them down. If you have some topics or mga themes and realizations, write them down. And then those things can help you analyze better your data, no? The data that you are collecting in your or for your research. And then qualitative research is an iterative and recursive process. Kanina sabi ni Dan, linear, no? Ang quanti, step 1, step 2, step 3, no? So kailangan wala kang ma-miss na step doon, okay? But for qualitative research, it's iterative. Ibig sabihin, paulit-ulit siya, no? Kung magpaulit-ulit ka siya, pwede kang magpunta sa step 1, step 2, balik ulit sa step 1, balik ulit sa step 2, 3, 4, 5, tapos na-realize mo, teka lang, babalik ulit ako sa step 2. So, pwedeng gano'n, gano'n ka-rigorous, ka-trabaho actually, and ka-recursive yung process when you're doing qualitative research, okay? So, for example, I've done interviews with my informants, and then nandun na ako sa part that I am transcribing, nagtatranscribe na ako ng mga interviews, and then I realized parang may kulang pa. Then I needed to come back to Manila para mag-interview ulit kasi I was in a different country then. Sabi ko, may kulang. So I needed to go back and then look for my informants again, and then conducted it. I needed to conduct my interviews again. So paulit-ulit siya until such time that I've reached the theoretical saturation, which I will be discussing later. Okay? So the preliminary preparation includes these components. The first one would be the topic choice. Of course, yung topic, ano yung topic mo? Ano yung general topic mo? And then the problem statement. Of course, the literature review. We already discussed that earlier. And your theoretical. And of course, if you have a conceptual framework that you want to propose for your research. Then the next stage is focused on field activities, choosing a potential location or subject, and followed by a more focused data collection. Then you may ask yourself these questions that you need to address so that you can settle the major issues and considerations of your research topic and design. So the first one would be, what should be my focus? Ano yung magiging focus ko, no? And then, what events and circumstances that should be studied, and how should this be studied? So una muna what, sunod, what ulit, ano yung events, circumstances, sino yung pipiliin ko, no? Sino yung pag-aaralan ko, and how should this be studied? Ibig sabihin nito, what should be the data collection methods that I should be employing to answer these questions, no? Using my focus. So make sure that your topic is interesting to you. I think that's one of the biggest things that you need to know and feel and realize when you do your research. Make sure that your topic is interesting to you. Make sure na mahal nyo yung topic ninyo. Not necessarily the method, but yung topic. Because again, the methods will just follow. Pag mahal mo yung topic mo, kahit anong methods yan, gagawin mo yan. Kahit hindi ako quantitative person, but if I think that my topic, yung love ko na topic, will be better addressed by a quantitative method and data analysis, then gagawin ko yun. Diba? Kung mahal na mahal ko yung topic na to, pero kailangan ko mag-survey pala ng 1,000 tao, no? Gagawin ko siya kasi mahal ko yung topic ko. Or if you are parang si Sir Dan, quantitative person, ayaw niya nag-i-interview ng tao, kunwari. Pero dahil mahal niya yung topic na yon, kunyari, mahal na mahal niya yung digital humanities, no? Pero again, humanities to. He needs to interview people, writers, scholars, authors, no?
Artists.
Yes, di ba? Artists. So, kailangan niya mag-focus group discussions with them, kunwari. Ganyan. He will still do it kasi that topic is really close to his heart. So, make sure that your topic is interesting to you. And then the next step nyo pa lang naisipin, how should this topic be studied? So, yung how na yon must be practical and doable. Your research design must be practical and doable. Parang awa nyo na, no? I know how much you want to make a difference in this world, but ang motto ko lagi, we cannot solve all the problems of the universe, ano? So marami kayong pwede pang ibang gawin, and make sure that the things that you are doing for your research must be something doable. Okay? And the most common methods used, again, I think na-mention naman na to earlier, na ginagamit natin for qualitative research are observation, could be covert or overt observation, participant observation. Yung pinakamadalas gamitin, qualitative interviewing. It's a very personal, person-to-person na approach. And interviewing can, especially during this time of pandemic, can be done online as well. So usually kasi nalilimit tayo, iniisip natin, how can I do qualitative interviewing during this time of pandemic? Hindi naman ako nakakakita ng tao, no? So possible siyang gawin. You can still do interviews, but the platform would be different. Okay? So meron katanggap-tanggap ang online interviews, wag kayo mag-alala. And you can also do asynchronous, no? Asynchronous interviews via email, via chat, no? Kaya pwede kayong mag-email sa kanila and then they can just answer your questions at their most convenient time, or pwedeng chat kasi may delay yun, kaya siya minsan nagiging asynchronous kasi may delay din siya, or depending on the platform that is preferred by your informant or by your participant. And then focus group discussion naman, kung hindi naman siya one-on-one, pwede naman isang grupo. So pwede kayo magkwentuhan o mag-discuss, especially if you're doing case studies that you want to solve a contemporary problem or issue in an organization. I think the most appropriate method for that is a focus group discussion, kasi after that discussion, you can come up with a sound decision, decision based on what has been discussed in that group. And you can also do that via online, mag-Zoom kayo, nag-uusap kayo, pero medyo challenging yon kasi hindi kayo pwedeng sabay-sabay mag-usap. Unlike in the physical, yung traditional way of doing focus group discussion, pag sabay-sabay kayo nag-uusap, pwede yung nari lang, pwedeng ganun, But for Zoom kasi minsan may madedelay, basta medyo challenging siya to do in a virtual environment, but it can be done. Hindi siya imposibleng gawin. It can be done. And of course, historical study. When we do historical studies, usually this would involve document analysis, archival research, content analysis of different textual records, or even photographic records, or even audiovisual materials. So you can make use of this as another method to conduct qualitative research. Okay? So that's for Quali.
Okay. So, malinaw na siguro sa ating lahat kung ano yung available methods na available sa atin. At this point, let's talk about how do we choose the participants that will be involved in our research. So for quantitative research, again, it's very systematic. As much as possible, when choosing participants in the research, actually, mali nga yung term na participant. Usually, participant, it is associated sa quali. For quantitative, it's sample. Sino ang magiging part ng sample? Kasi pag sample, it must be random. Kasi as much as possible, gusto mong makakuha ng isang magandang sample that would represent, hopefully, the population. Okay? So, kung kayang i-census, kung kayang tanungin yung buong population, for example, kung kaya mong tanungin ang lahat ng librarians sa Pilipinas, then do. But since hindi siya efficient and halos imposibleng magawa yon, in quantitative research, you try to get a sample that you hope will be a good representation of the population, so that kung ano man yung makuha mong measurement or trend na dun sa sample, you can infer that towards the population. So, yung mga types ng sampling pagdating sa quantitative research, so we have yung tinatawag natin probability sampling and non-probability sampling. Pag probability sampling, usually either it's stratified. Pag sinabi natin stratified, may identified ka na strata or group of respondents. So for example, gusto mong ang strata mo ay yung 4 na uri ng library. So you have public, academic, school, and special. So hindi ka mag-randomly ask ng librarian. Tatargetin mo yung mga strata na yon, and kapag na-target mo na yung strata na yon, doon ka randomly mag-assign ng mga respondents mo or ng mga sample mo. At least well represented yung 4 na types of libraries dun sa research mo. Pag cluster naman, minsan kasi talaga mahirap makuha yung every strata. So what you do is you identify na lang a cluster and you hope that within that cluster is a good representation of the whole population. So for example, ang research mo is about information seeking behavior ng mga taga Marikina. So, ang hirap naman na pupuntahan mo lahat ng barangay sa Marikina para lang makuha mo yung pulso ng buong Marikina. So, what you do is, pupunta ka lang sa isang barangay, so that is one cluster, and if nakakuha ka ng very varied na sagot within that particular barangay, then you can say that that particular barangay is a good representation na of the whole Marikina. So that one barangay is one cluster. Usually kapag nag-sample ka sa isang barangay at homogeneous yung nakuha mong sagot, then it's a sign na hindi siya magandang cluster. Kasi nga, ang mas normal na behavior ng dataset ay vary. So as much as possible, gusto mong makuha lahat ng possible answers or possible point of view ng isang population. So the only way to test that is kailangan yung sample mo varied din yung sagot nila. So as much as possible, go for a heterogeneous data set. And kapag heterogeneous yung data set mo, then you have a very good representation of the population. For non-probability sampling, ano lang yan, either convenience o purposive. Purposive kasi, for example, are you a librarian or not? Kung librarian ka, kasama ka sa research ko. So there is a purpose. Pag hindi ka librarian, hindi ka kasama sa research ko. Yung convenience, you do this, you do convenience sampling kapag gusto mo munang i-test yung research instrument mo. For example, yung survey questionnaire mo, yung research question mo, na hindi nauubos agad yung pwedeng maging sample mo. So, halimbawa, gusto mo malaman kung leading ba yung questions ng survey mo. So, pwede mo muna siyang i-test sa mga kaibigan mo, sa mga kapitbahay mo. Then, pag na-figure out mo na ay leading to or hindi siya nag-fail siya sa test ng reliability or validity na na-mention kanina ni Ma'am Iyra. So, pwede mo pang i-revise yung research instrument mo nang hindi nauubos yung sample mo. So, that's when you do convenience sampling. So, pag okay na yung research instrument mo, you do either you do purposive sampling or you do probability sampling. I talked to someone na taga SWS and usually umaabot daw talaga to ng mga 7 revisions, 10 revisions kasi nga from time to time nagfe-fail siya sa test of reliability and validity. So kasi nga as mentioned kanina, that is very very important lalo na pagdating sa data gathering. So yun ang sa quantitative. Paano naman po sa quali?
Okay. So for the qualitative naman, there is no magic number. Okay? So kung gaano ka-structured yung sinabi ni Dan kanina, you should be drawing out samples so that you can make sure that your sample is the correct representative of a certain population that you'd like to study. For qualitative research, wala talagang magic number. Okay? You can study one group of people, you can even study a single person or kahit nga tatlo o dalawa o kahit ilan. So how do we choose our samples? Again, since usually karamihan ng mga qualitative research ay exploratory in nature. So wala tayong masyadong preconceived idea o kung sino kaya yung pinakamagandang representative ng isang community, for example, that we'd like to study. Because we're not looking for representativeness. Yun yung kaibahan niya sa quantitative. Na sa quantitative, kailangan tong, let's say, 500, the rightful representative of this barangay. No? Kunyari, balik tayo sa Marikina. Alam nga namang, ako po talaga ang representative ng barangay ng Marikina. Ako po ang rightful representative. And of course, we cannot ascertain that. And that's not our goal in doing qualitative research. Okay? So we do sampling as well, but mostly it's snowball sampling because we get referrals from people. No? Kanyari, kilala ni Dan yung barangay captain, kasi tinuro ni barangay captain ako, then ako tuturo ko yung ibang kapitbahay na maaari niyang kausapin. And yun na siguro yung pinaka malapit na kind of sampling that we're doing in qualitative research. But we also have a theoretical sampling. And this is very much used, no, in qualitative research, because in theoretical sampling, we seek here and collect pertinent data to elaborate and refine categories in our theory. So, paano nangyayari yun? Kunwari, nag-interview ako ng mga tao, tapos ito yung sinasabi nila. Meron silang, tapos kinategorize natin yung kanilang opinion, for instance. Opinion as opinion A. Tapos, kinategorize natin opinion B. No? So, may gusto kang patunayan in opinion A. So, as much as you can, you will try to gather more data na meron pang opinion C, D, E, F, G hanggang Z. So, depende sa inyo yon. But if you notice that people keep on saying the same thing, puro opinion A lang, tapos B, A, B, A, B, tapos wala nang variation masyado yung mga sinasabi ng mga tao, or maski yung mismong nag-iisang respondent ninyo o nag-iisang informant ninyo, paulit-ulit na lang yung sinasabi niya, then that's the time that you have saturated your data collection or the concept or the theme that you're trying to explain here. So once you have the theoretical sampling, so ibig sabihin, ang dami ko pa pang nakukuha. No? Hanggat may nakukuha ka ng mga bagong information, you keep on interviewing. But once you have reached the saturation point na people or your informants keep on repeating the same thing, so ibig sabihin, you have already saturated the theme or the category or si opinion A, na-saturate na siya, you should stop conducting your data collection. So, doon ka na mag-stop. So, yun yung ideal, no? That's the ideal way of choosing your respondents and also the ideal way of saturating your theory or stopping your data collection. But in a more practical manner or in a more practical sense, kasi mahaba talaga ang qualitative research, no? Some people na i-conduct ng qualitative research, some may spend like 2, 3, 4 years of fieldwork, minsan mas matagal pa sa pag-gather ng data no, for their research. But of course, kung medyo practical kayo, if you think na wala na kayong funding, wala na kayong time, then I think that's a logical reason why you have to stop collecting data. So that's for quali. Okay? So, alright. So, yung next step naman natin is data analysis. So, how do we analyze our data?
So, for quantitative, there are 4 main ways to analyze data. Measures of central tendency, measures of dispersion, measures of position, and measures of relationship. Pag sinabing measures of central tendency, dyan papasok yung mga average, median, because again, we want to generalize everything. So, what is the average income ng isang librarian? Or at any given day, what is the average user ng ating library? And it is important for us to know that because at least, pag alam natin kung gaano karami yung i-expect natin at any given day, we can prepare ilang lamesa dapat meron ang library natin, ilang staff dapat ang naka-assign sa area na to kasi we are expecting this much patrons or students. Measures of dispersion gives you the average dispersion or average variability. So obviously, kapag may average users ka, hindi naman eksaktong yun talaga yung darating sa library mo. So pwede nating sabihin na may average users ka na 30, pero yung dispersion mo ay ang average dispersion mo ay 10. So it is you can expect na at any given day you can have 20 to 40 users. So at least you are prepared to accommodate that certain number of library traffic. And then measures of position is when you want to compare your position versus another library. So for example, gusto mo malaman between the different libraries, sino yung may pinakamaraming traffic. But the problem with that is, obviously, per library, iba-iba yung measures nila, iba-iba yung dispersion nila. So usually dito, ini-standardize yung mga measure para malaman yung position mo relative to another type of variable. So, ang laging example namin dito, kapag papasok ka sa isang university at kailangan kumpitin yung grade mo, kailangan i-standardize muna siya. So, yung ibang school, up to 100 yung kanilang pinakamataas na grade, yung iba 95, yung iba A+, yung iba yung way nila na pag-compute ng grade. So, para malaman kung sino talaga yung mga nasa upper 10% ng class na yon, ini-standardize muna siya, then mini-measure yung position nyo. Then last is measure of relationship. So, gaano kalakas or gaano kahina ang relationship ng isang variable against another variable. So, dyan papasok yung mga regression, dyan papasok yung mga factor analysis, ito bang variable na to ay nakaka-affect sa variable na to. So, that's one question. The next question is, gaano kalakas ang epekto ng variable na to sa isang variable na to. So, those are the things na usually, again, you will use statistics for this. Hopefully, kahit hindi nyo alam yung longhand ng statistics, kasi marami naman dyan na online calculator, web calculator na automatically ibibigay na sa inyo yung number. Ang importante dito ay when you do this, alam nyo kung ano yung story or ano yung context kapag nabigay sa inyo yung statistical computation. So kapag ba ganito yung nakuha nyo number, statistically different ba yung A at B? Kapag nakuha nyo yung ganitong number, may nag-exist ba na relationship between variable A and variable B? So that is something that you have to look for when doing quantitative research pagdating sa analysis part. So let's proceed naman sa quali.
Okay, so for the qualitative research naman, may mention ni Dan, no, na pwede kang gawin ito na software to compute for you. Well, in qualitative research, we also have computer-assisted qualitative data analysis software like NVivo or QDA, Deduce, no? Pero regardless of the software that you would be using or you'd like to use for your data analysis, always remember that your data analysis is about bringing order, structure, and meaning to the mass of your collected data. So in quantitative, it's very structured. In quali, structured din naman, but it doesn't proceed in a linear fashion, no? Parang sinabi ni Dan kanina. Sometimes it is messy, sometimes it is ambiguous, very time-consuming, no? And at the same time, creative din siya and very fascinating, okay? So the purpose of this process is to search for general statements and also relationships among the different categories and themes and concepts that are actually grounded and should be grounded in the literature that you have read. Kaya nga meron tayong literature review, di ba? Kailangan nyo talaga na magbasa. So whether you like it or not, you need to immerse yourselves in the literature. So the purpose of doing qualitative data analysis, the first one is to identify patterns and themes. We may not be doing calculations, we may not be doing statistical analysis, but you need to categorize the responses, or your findings, yung mga field notes ninyo. You need to summarize them or even index them. Yung mga ating librarians or mga future librarians natin, you know the process of indexing, di ba? You are categorizing different things or you are categorizing and classifying them and cluster them together in a single term. So you're also doing that in qualitative data analysis. You'll be doing, let's say, 10 interviews. After you transcribe them, you need to go through the interview transcription and then you see and try to set the different categories and themes na pwedeng mag-describe or mag-classify nung mga sinabi ng respondents or nung informants ninyo. Okay? And then, you try to discover relationships and insights into the key issue or problem that is being investigated. So you try to relate the themes and the categories that you have seen, no? Based on your data, and then you relate them to the key issue or problem that you're trying to find out or you're trying to resolve or investigate. And it's also important that after you process all these things and you analyze this, yun yung gagawin ninyo ay mag-i-inform to the creation of theoretical possibilities and at the same time, rich description again of a certain phenomenon so that people will better understand why these things are happening. So, paano yung ginagawa yung coding? Coding talaga yung ginagawa natin dito, no? So, parang indexing din. Para ka nag-i-index, no? Na, kaya, term A, under this, lahat ng sinabi nito, nagka-qualify dito. Kaya, sinabi ko na, nahihirapan ako sa online learning. Na nagsabi ulit, nahihirapan ako sa online teaching. Tapos may nagsabi namang isa ng, hirap na ako, no? Sa online learning environment. So, with all these responses from different people that you interviewed, ano kaya yung term o ano yung category na magde-describe sa kanya? Hardship, paghihirap, no? Or pwede rin naman na ang code ninyo dyan would be facing difficulty in this online environment. So pwedeng ganun yung category ninyo. So with that kind of category, lahat ng related sa paghihirap, hardship, no? Yung ayaw nila sa online learning environment would be put under that category. So after you go through all the interview transcripts or even the documents, may mga documents kayo na mga inaral, ipapasok nyo doon, then you will see, ito pala yung gusto nilang sabihin. And then you will use those categories and themes pagdating sa pag-present nyo ng data that you gathered and also for your writing then ng final reporting. So do not just present your raw data. Kasi mamaya, minsan isip ng mga tao na, kailangan kasi maging objective talaga. I need to be close to the data as possible, ano? Parang, okay. Pero of course, you need to categorize them and then you try to make sense. Lagi talaga sinasabi, you need to make sense of the data that you gathered and you categorize them and you classify them according to the themes and codes and different categories that you set. So the themes and patterns that emerge from the data may be shaped by your preliminary findings until you reach your theoretical saturation, the thing that I discussed earlier. And also the various strategies of your data collection, or even the range or variation of your participants and the data collected from them, and also the interpretations. And the interpretations would be based from the literature and from the research participants' perceptions, and even based on your reflexivity as a researcher or how you situate yourself in your research. So coding is very important. It's one of the ways of analyzing your data because sometimes when you do qualitative research, minsan hindi rin naman kayo nagko-code eh. Especially kunyari, when you do literary criticism, minsan wala namang coding na involved yun. Or kahit historical analysis, sometimes hindi mo naman kailangan ng coding din. But for methods like interviews, focus group discussion, na ganyan, even content analysis din pala, coding is helpful because you can categorize different themes and different data, and your codes will serve as the pivotal links between your data and the emergent theory that would explain this data.
I think maganda rin talaga na kahit quanti sila, maganda rin ma-practice yung coding kasi kapag nagsulat sila ng review of related literature nila, kailangan din nilang i-exercise yung coding skills nila kasi it's one way of para papagsama-sama nila yung mga magkakatulad na research, magkakatulad na models, magkakatulad na theory, para lang din madaling ma-identify kung nasan yung gap. So pag magkakasama kasi yung mga magkakapareho, mas madali makita asan yung hindi pa na-explore. Uh,
I think our LAS students are well-trained, pagdating sa ganyan, sa categorization, organization. So make use of those talents and skills that you have gained during your undergraduate or master's days.
So at this point, we would like to highlight a particular trend na nakikita namin. Kasi minsan, especially with our research students, palaging minsan lang, nauuna yung pagpili nila ng methods bago pa nila ma-identify kung ano talaga yung research nila or before pa nila ma-articulate yung research problem nila. Just because feeling nila kapag pinili agad nila yung method, mas madadalian sila. Which is very far from the truth. So, yung sabi nga ni Silverman, method should be our servants, not our rulers. Kailangan your method should work for you. Hindi ikaw yung maghahabol para mapilit mo yung method na gusto mo.
Or do not choose a method because it's your favorite method. Dapat yung topic nyo, yung favorite ninyo, no? Yun yung mahal ninyo.
Hindi yung method.
But pwede nyo rin namang mahalin yung methods nyo. But again, this should not rule your life, no? As a researcher.
So maybe Ma'am Iyra, we can cite an example para lang din magkaroon pa sila ng clear idea on the difference, or at least ano yung approach kapag quantity ang isang research, ano yung approach kapag quality isang research. So we come up with this topic. So librarian salary in the Philippines. So
interesting no? Interesting.
Okay. So we're going to explore this topic both from a quantitative point of view and from a qualitative point of view. So from a quantitative point of view, this is something na ginawa ko because we had this census in 2018 and we were able to identify ano yung average salary ng mga librarians. So we did a survey sa isang PLY Congress. Sinadya talaga namin na sa PLY Congress kami magsa-survey kasi from Northern Luzon hanggang Mindanao, well represented ang mga librarians doon. So after doing the survey, after doing our data gathering, ito yung lumabas na quantitative data. So kung makikita nyo, this is something na you can maybe relate to because kung makikita nyo kung ano yung average salary ng isang librarian sa Pilipinas, and yung mga dots na makikita nyo dun sa bandang taas, those are outliers, considered outliers as far as generalization is concerned. Kasi nga, sabi natin, we want to define what is normal, what is abnormal. So kapag ginamitan mo na ng statistical tools, statistical computations, ito yung lumalabas. So some research question na pwedeng masagot ng quantitative research ay yun nga, what is the average salary of librarians in the Philippines? So pag na-offeran kayo ng something na mas mababa dito, you can cite this particular figure, this particular measurement as ito po, according to research, according to study, ito po yung average salary ng isang librarian. So this is something that you can use para mahagil kung mababa yung offer sa inyo. Another research question na pwedeng masagot quantitatively is what is the relationship between salary and place of work? Or meron ba talaga silang relationship? And based on the figure, apparently there is. So there is a relationship between kung saan ka tatrabaho at yung taas ng sweldo mo. So this is something that you can use para mag-decide kung okay, so magiging librarian pala ako, I will target na dito mag-apply or gusto ko dito magtrabaho kasi mukhang mas mataas ang sweldo doon. Or another way of looking at this is a data that you can use to juxtapose sa ibang Southeast Asian countries para pwede nating i-lobby sa mga organizations or maybe sa government natin na taasan yung at least yung valuation sa atin at sa profession natin. So that is for the quantitative point of view. For qualitative point of view naman.
Okay, so for the qualitative point of view, since we're not again concerned about the generalized results, ano yung normal na track ng sweldo ng mga librarians natin, we ask questions like this. Why do librarians stay in their jobs given their current salary? And these are actually open-ended questions. When you formulate qualitative research questions with this kind of general topic, ito yung maaari ninyong itanong. Then, another thing is, what are the value-added benefits that motivate the librarians to stay in their jobs? So ito, hindi na ito na-quantify. No? Ito yung mga open-ended questions na nasagot ng mga librarians na bakit sila nagsistay in this given salary. So ito yung mga ibang mga benefits that they have been receiving, and they feel motivated to stay in their jobs. So interesting yung mga lumabas. Of course, may mga clothing allowance, attendance to conferences, and since ang tinitingnan natin dito ay hindi generalized results, these are individual responses, the individual responses. And ang striking dito na usually hindi nyo makikita sa mga numerical analysis ng quantitative research ay mga ganito. Emotional maturity, sense of belongingness, because these things, hindi siya na-predict when the questionnaire was constructed. Itong mga bagay na to, hindi siya na-predict when the study was launched or started. So, kung babalikan natin, Sir Dan, we can go back to the slide about the general topic. The research topic here is very general, librarian salary in the Philippines, but as you have seen, you can approach this general topic differently. You can approach it in a quantitative way, asking these questions, and then you can approach it in a qualitative way, asking these questions and getting these responses. Okay, so we hope that you're able to see not necessarily the difference, but perhaps the relationship, the dynamics between quantitative and qualitative research and the associated methodologies and methods when you do these types of research. And nasample na rin natin, kunyari may isa kang topic, how do you approach it differently? And of course, we have shared with you some tips on how to conduct the research, but disclaimer lang, we're not research experts. We're learning with you, and we're learning from you, we're learning from each other, we're learning with each other. So magkakasama tayo na patuloy na nag-aaral and nag-i-improve as librarians, as information professionals, as archivists, as we do this kind of parang bagong endeavor. Hindi siya bago talaga at all, pero this is something that we really need to do. Ito yung kailangan natin gawin as what we have explained earlier.
And I think this is something that I agree, Ma'am Iyra. This is something that we have to do together because I believe that research is something na hindi mo pwedeng i-memorize. You have to do this really to acquire the skill set of checking for the validity and the reliability of your research instrument. Yung pagkukode, it's a skill set na hindi mo makukuha hanggat hindi mo siya nagawa. So, si Ma'am Iyra, nagtatry siya mag-stat. Nagtatry ako mag-thematic analysis just for the sake na ma-experience ko siya. And hopefully, kapag kinailangan ko, kaya ko siyang gawin on my own as my research improves and explore other ideas and concepts sa field ng LIS.
So, we're not really claiming na kami yung magaling dito, no? Hindi talaga. Ang gusto lang namin is, of course, for everyone to be more encouraged to see the beauty of research and also to enjoy doing research. Kasi sa start pa lang, di ba, para pag narinig mo yung word na research, parang para nag-hyperventilate na agad, especially our students, parang, wala pa akong kape, mga ganon. But yeah, and we also experience the same dilemma, the same problem as teachers and also as researchers.
So, thank you for the privilege of your time, and I think it's time na for the question and answer portion.
Yay! Thank you!
Thank you so much, Ma'am Iyra and Sir Dan, for such a rich discussion on qualitative and quantitative methods. We have a lot of viewers right now, and I'm sure that they have a lot of questions for you. To our audience, if you have any questions for our speakers, you can go to menti.com and key in the code 80781673. You could also use the QR code shown on screen to go to the questions page. Please check the previously posted questions and upvote questions you would like to be prioritized. While we are waiting for more questions, I would like to announce a few things. We are currently accepting applications to our Master of Library and Information Science postgraduate program for academic year 2021 to 2022. Interested applicants may visit bit.ly/MLIS2021 to download the prospectus and application requirements. The application is open to all individuals with an undergraduate degree who are interested in pursuing or furthering their career in the information professions. The deadline for application is on June 21, 2021. Inquiries about the application process, requirements, or the MLIS program may be directed to the Graduate Program Coordinator, Professor Jonathan Isip, at gpc@slis.upd.edu.ph. In connection with this, we'll have an MLIS open house on June 5, 2021, Saturday at 1 o'clock p.m. If you are interested to know more about our MLIS program, or if you have any questions about the application process, please sign up and join us on Saturday. You may register at bit.ly/MLIS open house. The latest issue of the Philippine Journal of Librarianship and Information Studies with the editorial entitled LIS Pedagogy in the New Normal Learning Environment is now available. You may download a free copy of the PHJLIS by going to phjlis.org. You may also submit your articles by logging in to the same website. Or if you have any inquiries, you may send your email to editor@phjlis.org. We would also like to thank those who already purchased our SLIS coffee table book. For those of you who have no copies yet, you can now pre-order for our next print run by going to bit.ly/SLISCTB. And for those of you who have fond memories of UPSLIS or ILS or ILIS, we also want to know your best, funniest, weirdest, oddest, scariest, sappiest memories in SLIS through a project called #IRemember. So if you have something that you want to share, please go to upslis.info/IRemember. And also, to ensure that every BLIS student is equipped with the required tools or gadgets for remote learning, the Kaagapay project for UP-BLIS students of the UP Library Science Alumni Association, or UP-LSAA, is still ongoing. This is in support of the program of the UP system, Kaagapay sa Pag-aaral ng mga Eskolang ng Bayan. You may donate in cash or in kind to help our BLIS students who may be struggling with remote learning. You may send your inquiries to uplsaa.inc@gmail.com. Finally, UPSLIS is still accepting donations for the construction and renovation of our new SLIS building. For your donations or other inquiries, you may contact us via email at admin@slis.upd.edu.ph. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow our new twitch.tv, and like our Facebook page, UPSLIS, where this video is currently being streamed. That's UPSLIS on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. Shout out to our viewers from Quezon City. Hi! I hope that you're enjoying and learning a lot from this webinar. At this point, I believe we have questions from our viewers. Let's now look at the questions posted on menti.com. Hi, Ma'am Iyra, and hi, Sir Dan. That was such an informative and detailed lecture that you gave, and we have a lot of questions from our viewers. I believe some of the questions here have already been answered in the lecture, in the webinar that you gave. But I will still be looking at some of the questions here. Let's start with this one. This one is the most upvoted question. This is more of a comment, really. Let me just read it. Looking at other questions here shows how quantitative the LIS research tradition is. Medyo mahirap mag-grasp ang qualitative kung nadrill na sa utak masyado ang quant. Ayan. This is, I think, more of a comment. But do you, Ma'am Iyra or Sir Dan, you want to give comment too about this particular insight from our viewers? Sir Dan?
Yeah, I think Dan should answer this first.
I think I do agree with the statement na medyo yung tradition ng research, actually hindi lang ng LIS. I think this is in general ay very quantitative because ang hugot kasi natin when we were learning research is back in grade school, back in high school, tinuruan tayo on how to do scientific inquiry, scientific research. And scientific research is very quantitative, it's very structured. So malaki talaga yung chance na pagdating natin sa college, pagdating natin sa pagsusulat ng thesis natin, yun pa rin yung dala-dala natin. And I hope this is something na ma-address sa K-12 na hindi lang quanti ang research approach na feasible. To be honest, I see a lot of quanti research na mas maganda sana kung quali yung naging approach. Pero yun nga, masyadong malaki yung influence talaga ng scientific method. Even in our school, meron tayong subject dati na LS 190 which is heavy on stat. Pero wala namang tayong subject on quali research. Kaya pagdating sa thesis writing, may parang bias na kailangan kong gamitin yung natutunan ko sa statistics class ko. Kasi bakit siya in-offer kung hindi ko naman siya gagamitin? So parang napupwersa tuloy na yung mga nagsusulat ng research ay gumamit ng quanti approach.
Okay. Yeah, so that's the reason why in UPS LIS we started to offer another elective on qualitative research methods in LIS to fill in that gap, no? The gap that was mentioned by Dan earlier. And I think one of the reasons then is that yun nga in scientific methods and kung babalik natin in LIS, where actually in information research in general, it's very parang deep yung pagka-anchor niya sa social science methods din, which are of course yung kanyang underlying philosophy and paradigm and how they view the world, it's very positivist to post-positivist. So the way we see things in this kind of world, in this kind of mindset that we have when we believe in scientific methods, minsan may isip talaga natin na when we do qualitative research, hindi tayo sanay or parang this is less scientific, diba? In the lecture that we just had, I also emphasized that despite not having a highly structured way of data collection, mukha lang siya hindi structured, pero structured pa rin siya. If you can only see how rigorous data collection is and even analysis when you're doing qualitative research, you will see that we're also satisfying the scientific methods. So, wag tayo magkakaroon ng Or perhaps let's debunk that thought na kapag qualitative research, it's less scientific or less reliable or less valid compared to quantitative research. And I think it's also part of human nature na rin. It's not just in LAS. We're very empiricist, no? We're always looking at empirical evidence, empirical data. Pero the observations, let's say observations, no, interview data, no, these are empirical evidence as well. They are not numbers, but these are empirical evidence that have been derived, no, from scientific methods. Pero hindi siya quantitative, but ito ay qualitative naman.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Ma'am Iyra and Sir Dan. Actually, that was a very detailed question. That was a very detailed answer. I think you already answered the next question that I was supposed to ask. So someone was asking if the same could be said for international LIS research, but I believe Ma'am Iyra mentioned that this is not just unique to us as local researchers, but the empiricist viewpoint really leads us to that path na parang quantitative ang way of thinking or preferred. I'm not hard yata, extreme yata gamitin yung word na preferred, no? But marami quantitative methods. Okay. Next, we have here, are there automatic analysis tools for qualitative data, like those available for quantitative tabulated data?
Yes, I also mentioned that in the lecture earlier. We also have, we call it computer-assisted qualitative data analysis software. And yeah, meron tayong ginagamit na ganon. But then again, if you don't have those software, those tools, you can do it manually. You can manually code or you can manually analyze your qualitative data. But of course, if you have like gazillions of qualitative data, sobrang dami na, and different formats. You have photographs, let's say, you have historical documents, mga PDF ninyo, you have interviews, recorded interviews, you also have audiovisual, kunyari, yung sound recording or video recording. It may be difficult for you to code them and to make sense of them. Then it would be helpful to have those software. But this software usually are not for free. Merong mga free software, pero of course, lahat naman ng libre may mga limitations. So usually, and yung highly used na software is usually yung NVivo and Deduce, and yun nga, minasok pa ni RQDA, but I haven't tried the free software yet. No? So, pero yun nga, if you don't have them, you can always code and analyze your data manually. So wala namang problema doon.
Okay. Thank you, Ma'am Iyra. Yan. And then next question. What do you think are mistakes that researchers make when they formulate a research problem?
Yeah. Common mistakes. Dan, kasi si Dan nag-handle ng mga undergraduate thesis proposals. So what do you think are the more or most common mistakes?
Sa undergraduate students ng research, ang pinaka-common na palagi namin na-encounter ay hindi naka-anchor yung research nila sa personal interest nila. Some of my students have this tendency na kung ano yung nakita nilang popular during their literature review, yun yung i-adapt nilang research endeavor nila, or sometimes kung ano yung available, kung ano yung madali, yun yung i-adapt nila for their research. Wala namang problema doon. As an academic exercise, it's their right naman. Pero if we're going to embrace the spirit of research, kailangan naka-angkla yung research problem mo sa research interest mo. Because research problem is something that is fluid. Habang ginagawa mo yung research mo, habang dinedevelop mo yung research plan mo pa nga lang, habang dinedevelop mo siya, nag-iiba yung research problem. Nag-a-adjust siya. And kapag halimbawa, masyado ka ng desidido dun sa research problem mo, ayaw mo na siyang bitawan, ayaw mo na mag-adjust, doon nagkakaroon ng stagnation, doon medyo natatagalan ng isang researcher kasi ayaw niya mag-adjust. Versus sa kung nakaangkla ang yung research problem sa interest mo, personal interest mo, then no matter what form your research problem will take, andun pa rin yung passion mo, andun pa rin yung kagustuhan mo na masagot yung masagot yung research mo kasi nanggagaling siya sa isang lugar kung saan invested ka, passionate ka, at kahit anong mangyari, gusto mo siyang matapos kasi you have an investment in that research. So as much as possible talaga, kailangan very close yung personal interest nyo dun sa research problem na itatackle nyo. Kasi research in itself ay mahirap na, masihirap pa yan kapag ginagawa mo siya towards isang bagay na hindi mo naman gusto.
Okay. Pero Dan, ang tingin ko, especially for undergraduate students, it's quite early for them to really tell or cement their research interest at this early point. Kasi parang kasi syempre bata pa sila, no? Bata pa sila, and they have been exposed to a lot of literature and sources that they see around. So there are a lot of influences then. So medyo, yun I think one of the reasons na nagkakaroon tayo ng problema when it comes to specifying what they really want to do. What do they really want to find out and explore as a researcher. And that's true. While it's just an academic exercise, it may be a good stepping stone for them to, once they are done with their undergraduate thesis, then they can also expand or extend that topic to a higher kind of research or perhaps a research activity. But to answer that question, sa akin naman, ang madalas naman nagiging problema, bukod dun sa interest, and maraming hindi mo malaman may specify, I think yung mga tao usually, they have this favorite method. No? Yung mention ko to sa lecture din kanina, that we have the tendency to focus on the method first before really understanding your problem or what you want to find out. So your method should always follow your method should always follow your problem. And tulad nga na binanggit namin kanina din sa lecture, may mga instances talaga na pwedeng magbago yung methods mo depending on the problem that you want to address. So do not be so fixated with the method. Kasi usually we would ask students, anong gagawin mo? Ano yung gusto mong gawin? Sabihin nila, ma'am, magsisurvey ako ng ganito. But when you ask them, mag-survey ako ng mga librarians working in school libraries. But when you ask them why, they couldn't answer directly or clearly. Kasi ang naisip lang nila, they would get, let's say, the demographics or the profile. Yes, it could be a descriptive research question, no? Pero what's beyond that? No? So why? I would always ask them why. Why are you going to do that? Do you think that is the most effective way to answer that question? And then saka sila mag-iisip na, baka nga mas maganda kung ganito yung, pwede pala ako mag-mix methods, let's say. So pwedeng ganun yung mga, so usually, yung nagiging problema, excited yung mga bata to think about their method, and then mag-a-apply agad sila ng method nila without even realizing why they are doing this research or what actually is their motivation for doing this kind of activity or this research.
Okay, thank you, Ma'am Iyra and Sir Dan. So sa mga nagpaplanong magsulat ng kanilang thesis, sa mga students na nanonood, at ganoon din sa mga mga planong magsulat ng kanilang LIS research, kailangan pala alam niyo ang motivation para guided kayo sa kung ano ang gagawin ninyo at paano ninyo gagawin ang inyong research. Okay. At nabanggit ni Ma'am Iyra kanina tungkol dun sa interest, meron tayong question dito related to that. How did you come up or how did you come to figure out and continue to pursue your research interests? Sir Dan and Ma'am Iyra.
Nung undergrad ako, ang it was based on my experience din. As mentioned ko nga, kailangan yung research problem mo malapit sa puso mo. And when I was doing, for example, my undergrad thesis, napufrustrate ako na kapag ginagamit ko yung upak ng library, hindi lumalabas lahat ng relevant materials na gusto kong mahanap. So doon nagsimula yung research interest ko. How can I figure out a way para in the future, kapag may naghanap ng material, mas mataas yung probability na makuha nila yung kailangan nilang gamit. So, sa gantong train of thought, makikita na yung pagiging quantitative talaga nung personality ko. So, minsan yung pagiging quanti or quali in terms of research approach, nakakabit din yan sa personality mo as a person. So, nakita ko siya as a problem and nakita ko na hindi lang ako yung nakaka-experience nun. There are other people who share my experience, who share my problem. So, yun yung in-explore ko. So, una kong sinisi ay yung software na ginagamit ng library. Pero sabi ko, hindi lang ito ang may problema. Maybe there are other factors. So, ang tinakal ko nun ay yung term na ginagamit ng library para i-index, para bigyan ng subject yung mga materials. So, that became my undergrad thesis. Ano ba talaga ang mas magandang gamitin? Yung Library of Congress subject heading or since may jargon naman ang mga domain, ang mga knowledge, for example, sa EDUC, meron silang pag nag-index sila, ERIC yung gamit nila. So what if yun ang gamitin for assigning subjects instead yung sa Library of Congress? So yun yung in-evaluate ko, pinaglaban ko yung dalawa, tiningnan ko kung sino yung mas effective, kung sino yung mas nakaka-capture ng keyword ng mga users. So again, kailangan lang talaga very close to you yung ipe-pursue mong research para nga kahit araw-araw akong bumabalik sa EDUC noon para pumunta sa OPAC at manguha ng keywords na ginagamit ng mga tao, okay lang sa akin because excited ako dun sa output na ma-generate ko at the end of my research.
So, ako na next na. Yeah. So, talking about personality, medyo obvious ba? Yeah, I'm really drawn to qualitative research without even knowing it. Because again, we were raised in a field, in a very, very positivist and post-positivist field of LAS. Now, we grew up learning standards, cataloging standards, indexing standards, how to organize and put order into things. So of course, I understand all those standards, but at the back of my mind, I was actually starting to question those standards. And I was asking, do you really need the standards? No? Do you really need the standards? And my research interest ever since has been on archiving. And the reason why I like archives is that yung descriptive standards kasi niya, kahit na may standards talaga, medyo mas flexible siya compared to published materials or library materials. So that's actually one of my in hindsight iniisip ko na bakit nga ba ako napunta dito. So in my undergraduate thesis hanggang master's and PhD, they're all about archives. Also the first one, undergraduate ko, this was a long time ago, I explored how the government archives rendered access services to the information sources that they hold. Because during that time, ulit yung nasa isip ko, during that time, there was no freedom of information yet. There was no National Archives Act of the Philippines. Yun yung naisip ko, no? So, without these standards and without this standards and without this yung mga instruments, how do these institutions still render their services and still make this government information available to all? So yun. So pagdating ko naman ng master's, it's about local government archives naman. So I tied it with local history, still qualitative. And then for my PhD, it's still about archives, but not textual archives anymore, but more of photographic archives. And then I tied it with memory studies and some other stuff. so that's how I found out. No, I realized that yes, this is my paradigm. This is the things that I like to do and I like to explore, and I'm so passionate about. So my colleagues here in the faculty know this. They already know what kind of paradigm that I have and my mindset as well. So kapag nagko-quanti na, I understand the quantitative stuff. Pero pag magko-compute na, parang ayoko na. So give it to Dan na lang. Pero yun nga. So yeah, so I think the thing here is that when you're realizing what kind of a researcher you are, siguro mag-retrospect din muna kayo, no? At mag-introspect pala. So isipin ninyo, saan ba ako masaya? O ganyan. Diba? Kapag gagawa ako ng isang topic or ng research, saan ako sobrang passionate? In my case, it's really archives ever since undergraduate. Usually, nagbabago undergraduate, master's, di ba, magbabago siya. But in my case, it's really about archives. So it may also be the same in your case, but pwedeng iba din, ano? So yun nga, you just have to understand yourself better.
Okay, ayan. So, again, tips ulit yan para sa mga naghahanap ng kanilang research topic. Kailangan na something that you have to write about something that you are passionate about. Yan. Okay, thank you, Ma'am Iyra and Sir Dan. And let's go to another question. This one, what are some examples of being scientific about how to process qualitative data, such as narratives from oral history interviews to control the researcher's subjective bias?
So, quali ulit.
Yes, ma'am. Opo.
Tanong naman kayo sa quanti. No? Okay. For the quali na. Pero I love receiving questions. No? So, okay. So, for that, of course, ganito kasi yon. If you're doing qualitative research, you must acknowledge that there will always be subjectivity. Okay? Because we are embracing the interpretivist, constructivist paradigm, and I'm not going to really explain that to you today, but I mentioned that in my lecture earlier. But you have to acknowledge that people have their own subjectivities. Tapos sinasabi nyo nga, di ba, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, no? Parang let's respect each other's culture, no? And race. So those are the things that we also do and acknowledge in qualitative research. Now, the question is, paano sa researcher, paano kung ini-impose natin yung own bias natin doon sa ating respondents? So that's another story. That's another story. Even though you can be reflexive, no, and be so sensitive about the things that you do in your research, in qualitative research. For example, pumunta ka sa isang community library and then you do ethnographic work. So you are there to do participant observation, no? You do perhaps some informal interviews, pero nandun ka to try to sway them, no? To have this kind of belief, no? As a researcher. So hindi lang siya scientific, hindi lang siya issue na pagiging scientific, but it is also an issue of ethics, no? Is your research being ethically done if you do that? So dalawa yung titingnan natin. You are not just being scientific here, but there is always a question of ethics when you do your research. So when you inject your own your belief, kahit tinatry mo silang isway, ganyan, hindi na siya actually question lang ng scientific ba to na method o hindi, no? Ang question na dyan, is it ethical to be done or not? Okay? So when you do qualitative research, ethics is not just an afterthought. Lagi ko sinasabi niya. It doesn't come na parang at the end na lang siya. Kasi mula pa lang, you should always remember that. So ngayon, while we are embracing subjectivities, we're embracing these things, we respect each other's thoughts and feelings, no? And other people may think that these are not valid because these are just feelings, In qualitative research, it is the process of collecting data that makes your data valid. No, it's not the end goal, no, end product by itself, but it's how you actually obtain your data that will make your data reliable and valid. Okay? So ngayon, may mga tanong. I'm sure may mga tanong dyan na gaano ngayon kadami, no? Yung dapat naming tanungin, i-observe, ano, para maging valid and scientific to. Again, there is no magic number because it is how you actually conduct your research, no? The process itself that will validate your results. So kunwari, paano nga naman? Sabi mo, nag-interview na ako na 3 oras. Kami ni Sir Dan. Usap tayo, 3 oras, no? Tapos na-realize ko, parang hindi pa rin eh. Hindi pa rin yun nasa-saturate yung theory ko, no? Yung my theoretical lens. I will go back to him again and let's have a conversation hanggang ma-saturate nga yung theoretical lens that I'm using at the beginning of my study, and that's the time that I can say that my data are valid. Okay, so that's the difference, and that's the difference. But at the same time, it complements, of course, no, the quantitative way of collecting data or doing research.
Okay. Thank you, Ma'am Iyra. Nabanggit ninyo kanina yung tungkol sa validity. Meron tayong isang question dito. Medyo related doon. Basahin ko po muna. If pretest of the instrument is not possible, can we ask experts in the field to test the validity of our instrument? And if yes, how many subject experts is required? Ayan. Testing the validity of the instrument.
For quanti, how do you do it? Quantitative.
For quanti po, yes, you can. You can ask experts. Actually, lalo na pag sa undergrad, we don't really recommend na sila yung mag-develop, sila yung mag-create ng kanilang research instrument as much as possible. Kung kaya nila mag-adapt ng research instrument na test na for validity and reliability, i-adapt na lang nila yon para lang mas safe. But yes, kung walang way para i-pretest siya, then by all means, pwedeng mag-consult sa subject expert. Pero again, sabi nga ni Ma'am Iyra, kailangan mo rin i-disclose yun na this research instrument, hindi ito na pretest, na ang nag-check lang for validity at reliability nito isang subject expert. So as far as the strength of the research is concerned, knock on isa siya sa pwedeng ma-perceive weakness ng research na yon. So kailangan mo lang siyang i-articulate. Bakit hindi mo nagawa yung pretest, ano yung credential ng expert mo, kung isa lang yung expert mo, bakit isa lang. So it's just a matter of documenting the process. Yes. And telling the readers na ito yung buong picture ng research mo. Hindi ka naman magiging less ba yung value ng research mo? Hindi. It's just that yun yung circumstances kung saan nag-operate yung research mo. You can make suggestions, recommendations kung paano siya mapapaganda in the future, but still, it's a valid research.
In qualitative kasi, although you have a set of guide questions, we call it interview schedule. We have those guide questions that you will be asking your participants or your informants. But basically, when you do your actual interview, sometimes you can't help but deviate from the actual questions. Kasi sometimes maganda yung conversation if you feel like having a free-flowing conversation with the person you're interviewing, then there's nothing wrong with that. But I've tried pre-testing interview questions as well. So I tried asking questions to some of my friends, and then just to get some feel of the actual questions themselves, and also how can I actually make the questions more understandable to my informants. So again, I am not testing the validity of my instrument itself, but I am testing my validity and reliability as a researcher, because in qualitative research, the main research instrument is yourself, is the actual researcher. How you ask questions, how you find your informants, and even how you analyze your data. So crucial talaga ang researcher sa qualitative research. Although there are qualitative research that can be done as a team. So may team kayo, kaya 10 kayong gagawa, may 3 mag-interview, may 3 magko-code, may isang taga-analyze, it still can be done. But then again, you should be, minention ni Dan kanina, you should be really transparent about the process that you have gone through when you do your research, and then it should be reflected on your paper.
Okay, thank you, Ma'am Iyra and Sir Dan. Another question. Aside from triangulation, what other method or technique to use in verifying data when doing qualitative research?
Parang na-mention ko na.
Na-mention na to kanina.
Yes. Tsaka yun din yung sinabi ko just a while ago.
Oo, yan.
But we do triangulation in qualitative research as well. Let's say, you can do interviews, and you can do document analysis, and then you can also do focus group discussions as you do a case study. Okay, the case study is like the broad umbrella of your research design. Then you do several methods to just to make sure that the data that you have gathered are enough and okay or good. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Ma'am Iyra. We have here, sagot na rin to kanina, how to avoid the bias in writing qualitative research. Si Ma'am Iyra na-answer na rin yan. Here we have, okay, most of the examples given are non-LIS. In LIS, can you give an example of research questions that can be answered by quantitative or qualitative methods? Nagbigay na rin kanina ng
That is the last part.
Yes, in the last part, yung librarian salary question. Yes, maybe the person that our viewer asked this question can review the video. Meron doon binigay na isang question, and Sir Dan and Ma'am Iyra gave some suggestions of kinds of questions that can be asked. Okay. Then we have, I have one question here. Is a survey useful in a qualitative study?
We also have qualitative survey. So this survey is not the typical quantitative survey questionnaire. It's just a listing of survey questions that are open-ended. Okay? So this happens especially for situations na you cannot personally interview or conduct a focus group discussion with this group, so you can just send them prior to the actual interview, or minsan via email, especially nowadays, diba? You cannot just interview people dahil you cannot go out of your house. So you can still do qualitative research online and do qualitative survey online. So yung questions ninyo, instead of doing it in a very personal manner or synchronous, you can do it asynchronously through qualitative survey, which is done online. Yeah.
Okay, so it is possible. Just ask.
Yeah, it is.
Questions pero open-ended.
Yeah.
Sige po. Ayan. We have here another question. Here, where and when can we use document analysis? Tapos may follow-up siya doon. Is that quantitative or qualitative?
Parehas.
Okay.
Oo. Dan, can you answer that?
Traditionally, pag sinabi natin document analysis, dyan papasok yung mga bibliometrics natin, citation analysis. So, pwede siyang quantitatively, ibig sabihin, may bibilangin tayo, titingnan natin yung relationship ng mga documents, sino yung receiver, sino yung sender. Pero, as mentioned by Ma'am Iyra, you can also analyze documents qualitatively. So, ano yung mga motivation para sa creation ng documents na to, ano yung mga factors para matagalan ang transmission or creation. So depende sa kung anong gusto mong alamin. So kung ano yung articulate mong research problem, doon magde-depend kung quanti or quali yung approach. So kung ang goal mo ay, again, as mentioned sa lecture namin kanina, to identify relationships, to get a sense of what is normal. For example, gaano katagal ang pag-process ng document A from start to finish. So obviously, that is very quantitative. Pag ang research question mo ay, yun nga, motivations, inspirations, kung bakit ganito ang itsura ng form na to, that's very quali. So again, depende sa research problem.
It really depends on the research problem. Kunwari, kung ikaw yung sabi ni Dan kanina, yung bibliometrics, you wanna know sino yung highly cited author at this particular time, kanya. So you do content analysis and then quantitatively you generate that. Diba? Pero if you're the type of person naman na you wanna analyze, let's say, the different themes, actually pwede rin eh, the different themes kunwari or the different themes na dinidiscuss sa archives kasi ako. In the journals, no, publishing archival studies articles from 2010 to 2020. So you can analyze that quantitatively. And then you can also analyze it qualitatively if you do yung coding na sinasabi natin, coding through coding the content. So you can also do that. So parehas din. And then when you do historical study, of course, you will be using documents. Kahit hindi ka historian, kung librarian ka, let's say you're doing a case study of this public library and you want to see the growth, the growth of this public library in the past decades. You can look at what the different annual reports or even the legislations na nag-establish ng ganito na in relation to the establishment of this public library, policy documents, of course, even yung mga budget documents. So you can make use of those.
Okay. Thank you, Ma'am Iyra and Sir Dan. Next question, is it possible to convert qualitative research into quanti or vice versa?
Parang hirap nung convert, no? Kasi pag kinonvert
data ba ang ibig niya sabihin?
Iko-convert sa gitna. Sa gitna ng research mo na diyan, ay, Paul pala, no? Then, it can be done, I guess, but we do not advise it. Medyo mahirapan po kayo eh. But you can try. Then let us know what will happen.
Maging mix siya, ma'am.
Mixed method.
Pwede mag-mix methods, siguro, mix. Pero sometimes kasi when you do mixed methods, medyo predefined na siya at the very beginning, no? Depending on the problem. So yeah, so that's why you really have to be clear with your problem and with your agenda, no? While you're doing the research.
May chance na kapag quanti ka na gusto mong gawing qual, malaki yung chance na you have to redo everything again. Kasi it's a different set of literature, it's a different set of research problem, it's a different set of methodology. So wala, overhaul. Ulit ka na lang ulit.
Oo, it's a different kasi we have experienced students na doing quantitative research pero they did not meet the, let's say, the sample, no? So hirap na hirap kami na parang paano to? Diba? So shall we transform it into a qualitative study or shall we reframe the problem so that we can make use of other data na pwedeng i-process natin qualitative? So medyo mahirap siyang, kaya sabi ko, it can be done, pero medyo mahirap. Mahirap
kung maaga pa, kaya pa.
Kung kaya pa, no? Pero pag sa bandang huli na.
Kung nakapag-data gathering na, mahirap na.
Yeah. So you need to discuss this with your advisor. Yeah, you should really look for a good advisor.
Okay, sige po. Ayan. Next question. Here, how can we code non-textual qualitative data like photographs and videos?
Nako, it's a totally different topic, but yes, you can do it. You can code, let's say, photographs. In vivo, I've tried it in vivo. You can do it in vivo. Pero isang picture, then may isang tao doon, you can code that person under a particular category, then you can do it. You can just highlight it. So it can be done. Pero when it comes to visual methodology, it's a different kind of methodology na ka-level ng phenomenology, ng narrative research, ganyan, ano. So it's going to be a different discussion na. But there are different ways of doing visual methods, no? Dahil you can mix them, let's say, with oral history, you can mix them with diaries, no? You have, let's say, a photo or a video, and then pwede mo siyang interpret, then you put it in a diary, and then what you're going to collect is the video and then the diary of the participant. So there are a lot of ways to do it. And then when you code it, it's the same as how you code textual data. Pero that's the thing, because in real practice, sometimes it's difficult to code this visual data by using coding. Coding in a sense that we're following the textual data method. So it's quite complicated. It's mahaba, overtime na tayo. So yeah, so maybe we can discuss that some other time.
Okay. So, baka pwede kayo mag-consult kay Ma'am Iyra.
Isa pang webinar, naloko lang.
Sa isa pang webinar.
Joke lang.
Sige po. Thank you po, Ma'am Iyra. We have a few more questions here. Konti na lang naman. Let's see. In quantitative, we can systematically put into a table percentage, statistics, etc. our data. But how about qualitative? How do we usually discuss or present our data?
Okay, so we usually discuss or present our data. Of course, sabi ko nga kanina sa lecture, without numbers, or kung may mga numbers man o table, usually descriptive lang siya. For example, we went to this 10 barangays. Ayan, we had like 30 informants, and then you describe them, no? Sino itong mga informants na to, ano characteristics nila. Pero when you write and discuss your analyses, usually you have to quote the participants' responses. No, kaya open-ended usually yung hinihingi natin. Kasi for example, ang hirap mag-discuss nang wala akong sinusulat. Ayan. Kunyari, meron kang isang theme sa paper mo. Yeah, example kanina din sa lecture, hardship, no? Hardships during this online learning, no? Hardship. Then magdi-discuss ka. Let's say you have a theory, a theory explaining that there is really, or a concept na explaining there's really hardships, in this online learning, and then for you to prove that or to substantiate that claim, you will put or cite what your informant has said, during the interview. So kunyari, based on the ganyan, there is really a hardship, blah 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 blah, just like what Dan shared, or just like what informant A shared, kung ayaw niya magpa-identify. Kasi i-quote niyo yung kanyang sinabi. Pero you have to be very careful because baka i-quote nyo lang lahat, like the entire paragraph or the entire transcript. No, that is not presentation of analysis and data and analysis, because what you're presenting are the raw data, and you have to be careful because you only have to present like chunks, yung mga some portions of it lang. Advice ko lang siguro, if you're writing qualitative research, you have to read and be exposed with different qualitative papers. Ako, ang ginawa ko nun, kasi syempre nangangapa din naman ako sa qualitative research, I've read a lot of papers in sociology, sociological research, anthro, history, and of course, communication din. Some communication. Pero kasi communication kasi mas quantitative siya. But yeah, this fields really helped me realize what kind of writing style I can use when I do or when I write my qualitative research. So social anthro history, they're very helpful. So I advise you guys that you better try reading them, or just make parang just make time to go through those papers para magkaroon din kayo ng idea how qualitative research are being written or presented or even published.
Okay. Ayan. Okay. Thank you, Ma'am Iyra. And Sir Dan, would you like to add anything?
Quali daw.
My suggestion, ano yung tanong?
Sir, ma'am, sorry.
Ano yun?
How
Pwede
to
presentation? Ganyan?
How to ano po, how
presentation.
to present yung data
With data.
for qualitative research po.
Ang and this is something na related dun sa mga tanong kanina on softwares na makakatulong para sa thematic analysis, coding for quali. My suggestion is basahin nyo. Wag medyo cheating kasi ng hindi naman opinion ko lang 'yon. Mas okay pa rin na kayo yung magbabasa no qualitative data set na makukuha nyo para mas ma-imbibe nyo yung data set. As mentioned kasi nga ni Ma'am Ira, kayo pa rin talaga yung magiging pinaka-research instrument. So the more na ma-imbibe nyo yung quali data, yung storya, yung context, saan nanggagaling yung mga sagot ng mga participants nyo, mas maisusulat nyo ng mas may value yung analysis nyo. Kasi malinaw sa inyo kung saan nanggagaling, ano yung hugot nila, ano yung konteksto nila, hindi yung sinamarize lang ng isang software. Kaya minsan may mga nawawalang bits and pieces of stories. So yun yung suggestion ko. Basahin nyo personally more than once yung dataset, yung quality dataset nyo para pag sinulat nyo, alam nyo rin yung buong picture nung dataset.
Thank you so much, Ma'am Ira and Sir Dan, for answering our viewers' questions. We will now award the Certificate of Appreciation to our speakers. The certificate reads, University of the Philippines School of Library and Information Studies presents the Certificate of Appreciation to Iyra S. Buenrostro-Cabbab and Dan Anthony Dorado for delivering the informative webinar entitled Changing Gears, Qualitative or Quantitative Research as part of the 2021 UP School of Library and Information Studies lecture series in celebration of its 59th anniversary, given the second day of June 2021 at the University of the Philippines, Diliman, Quezon City. Signed, Veruena U. Apolinario, Head SLIS Road to 60 Committee, and Mary Grace P. Golfo Barcelona, Dean. Thank you so much, Ma'am Ira and Sir Dan. Again, thank you so much, Ma'am Ira and Sir Dan. We wish you success in all of your endeavors. To all our viewers, thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you all had meaningful takeaways from this webinar. Thank you too to our SLIS faculty for making this event possible. Special shout out to Professor Nathan Isip, Professor Mark Santos, and Professor Dan Dorado for managing the tech side of this event. And to Professor Johan Frederick Cabab and Mr. Dridge Paul Reyes for their work on the graphics and publicity materials, as well as the sound mixing for this webinar. To give feedback and to receive your certificates, please don't forget to register using the link to be shown on screen. If you missed portions of this webinar, you may rewatch it as a Facebook video or check our YouTube channel. For updates on our upcoming activities, please follow us at our official Facebook page, UPSLIS. Subscribe to our YouTube and Twitch channels, youtube.com/UPSLIS and twitch.tv/UPSLIS. Or visit our website, slis@upd.edu.ph. You can also watch our online talk shows on YouTube. For the Record, Faculty Room, and the student-produced digital scholarship series. And the latest, Coffee Break, Reflections and Conversations. A new talk show was also recently launched called Off the Record. Just over a year ago, UPSLIS started For the Record, a conversation series where archives and information studies professors chat about everything records and archives. We are now proud to present a spin-off series called Off the Record. Off the Record is a student-led series discussing key concepts, principles, and practices in archives and records management. The videos are produced by our students in the Bachelor of Library and Information Science program. If you like our videos on social media, don't hesitate to share it. Not only that, but we are also prepping for more upcoming activities, so watch out. These are all part of our journey on the road to 60, looking forward to the 60th anniversary of UPSLIS next month. Please join us for our SLIS at 60 anniversary week. This is next month. We will have several events over the course of a week, which will include a lecture entitled SLIS at 60, Future Directions. Our Dean, Professor Mary Grace P. Golfo Barcelona, will be our speaker. This will be on the 7th of July, 2021 at 2 p.m. Philippine Standard Time. That wraps up our UPSLIS webinar. Once again, this is Ina Santos, your host and moderator, wishing you all the best. See you next month for our SLIS at 60 anniversary celebration.